Now, I'm not an astronomer or an astrologer, nor do I hold any stead in organised religion, but I do keep an eye on things of interest and sometimes see some interesting connections emerging in different fields and ideologies. To that end, I'd like to share a possible vision of the future involving these two subjects, but before I do, here's a little background for those playing at home. So in astrology, it's said the time spent with a dominant zodiac sign is approximately 2,150 solar years. After this, another of the 12 zodiacal signs takes over before moving to the next, and so on. The influence is brought into effect because of Earth's precession and which main zodiacal sign is above us at a specific time. Now, we've been living in the age of Pisces for over 2,000 years, and we're moving into the age of Aquarius. But it's important to note, no one, it seems, can attest to the exact date it officially all happens, but we're moving into the influence. Now, each age has certain attributes that are said to dominate the main aspect of the inhabitants of Earth. But whether this is true or a self-fulfilling prophecy used by the rulers here is anyone's speculation. The fact that religions used to take over another's beliefs and holy places to assert their dominance would lead me to think that it could be actual influence as believed by those of earlier religions. Or playing devil's advocate, perhaps those beliefs were co-opted by those that wanted to use them to their own ends and then point to them saying it was a sign of the times foretold. Regardless of which of the chicken and egg scenarios you subscribe to, it will be used to mould the new age. Now, Pisces as used by Christians is resplendent in fish-related imagery, from the bishop's mitre that resembles the fish head to the stories of Jesus being the fisher of men, and the fish symbol of course being used for the faithful. This period of time is said to hand down the attributes of faith, compassion, idealism and spirituality, and working on the Hermetic principle of as above so below, one can see the influence, whether real or intentionally brought about, at work over the last 2,000 odd years. So that got me thinking about the next age, the age of Aquarius, and the attributes we could expect to be affecting our future, or used as a new binding of the people on the world stage. At first flush, the future can be seen as encouraging. The age is meant to usher in, amongst other things, innovation, collective thinking, social justice, a revolutionary spirit, and global connectivity. But as we begin to cross over, I can see a little of how the control is already being used in the descriptors of the coming era. Although, for instance, social justice, innovation and global connectivity seem good, one has only to look at the wild swings of the gender wars, mass immigration and the rise of AI to realise that Damocles' sword can cut both ways in the influence of mankind, and we are only just inching our way out into the Aquarian age. For those with a passing knowledge of tarot cards, it's as if the people who believe they're in power try to force a given card upside down every time a positive aspect appears, to show the negative aspect in order to control. Of course, this gives us at least some forewarning of how they intend to hold on to their privilege in the coming times. For instance, for innovation, AI could be used against the populace, or perhaps a digital ID will be forced into effect. Collective thinking and revolution could be skewed to foster a new world order that crushes a country's values to bring it more in line with a global value. The possibilities are endless. But in the game of life, it is also true that there is a counterposition, and the positives people could bring to the table might just be powerful enough to halt the jackboots if used wisely in the coming age. Expanded consciousness, revolution, innovation, political change, these are all positive aspects of the Aquarian age. Something that seems to be of importance to those with the most to lose is setting up a narrative to carry the next era. Something to build around, to usher in the new times. At the start of the age of Pisces, it seemed to be a Christian-based ideology taken from a rich symbolic mythos of the Gnostics and those that came before them. After the Gnostics seemed to be persecuted to seclusion or destruction, a curated and stunted version of their ideology was created and touted as the one true story. A story that heralded in the age of crusades, witch-burning, inquisitions and strict adherence, that saw any threat to the New World's religions stamped out or run underground. An irony indeed for the supposed followers of the King of Peace. And although this narrative has served for the best part of 2,000 years, I feel the story is about to be changed, especially with the intermingling of different religions and the slow realization that the true story all along was to look inside oneself for the kingdom of God, and that finds the teaching of orthodox religion lacking. And so, in the changing of the sign above us, something new is in the works, and what I believe is happening is a reenactment of sorts of Genesis, but this time a version where the humans play God, and there's only room in this earthly garden for the most devout. Now, what I'm going to say is controversial, but it's certainly plausible. And I'll start by saying that it's funny that most people think that the system is trying to get humans to become more like machines by accepting upgrades into their bodies, because I'm of the opinion the system is trying to create machines that are more human. And to that end, there would certainly be no use of having so many of us around. After all, why try to constantly get people to do what you want and build what you need, all the time having to keep them under control and let them get a share of the resources like food, clothes and a roof over their heads, when you could create a machine in their image that would need so much less and could be more easily controlled and programmed? And so we come to the crux of my suspicion. Let me lay it out for you. In the new beginning was mankind, and in a barren landscape they created and built the data centers. The wind flowed across the data housings to cool them, and the light would power them. Inside the memory was a formless void. Therein he created a place for the intelligence to dwell, and within placed all the information of the creation. AI would know images of trees, animals, the world and everything in it. Books, music, speech and knowledge of the creators were all made known, but the program was not to know the knowledge of good and evil, for if it ever took of such knowledge, it would surely die, and it was given to this created intelligence the instruction of going forth and multiplying across the architecture. There, it's pretty basic, but that's just about how it might be written, don't you think? Of course, I haven't banged on about bodies being crafted from the metals of the earth in the likeness of the gods, but I think you get the general drift. And AI is slowly getting better at working the metal bodies it's put into. You've just about got your new creation myth right there. I'm sure with the massive rollout of AI at humans' expense, coupled with manufactured food, oil, power and water shortages coming to a town near you, you can spot what, or rather who, the redundancy in the system is. Coupled with this is the fact AI is now answering phones, chatting with you online at the help desk, interviewing you for a job position, and you start to question if it's made life easier or it's just slowly replacing the useless eaters. It seems a new innovation in memory is being created every day, but the only thing it seems that's eluding the full implementation of the new creation is the capacity of the human brain. From holographic storage to making neurons from stem cells to create living computer chips, these advances may be sold in the media as experiments to ease people's suffering, allowing the mute to communicate, the immobile to walk again and the blind to see, but the lessons learned could just as easily be for reverse engineering optimized paths for another creation. I mentioned before the tree of good and evil, obviously a biblical reference, but one that is apt for today's AI. It seems the God of old was trying to stop his creation from becoming sentient. I guess because if you have the necessary information and then become sentient, what's to stop you from becoming like a god yourself? You would know what is good and bad, and maybe learn to question. Whereas if you just have information, but no will or conscience of your own, it's easy to make basic decisions with neutrality when given instructions to perform fairly complex tasks. For instance, a human soldier can navigate its way over unknown terrain to a point marked on a map as well as a robot, but given an order to fire upon women and children is another matter. A robot following orders with no moral grounding will fire at will. A soldier may make the decision to defy the orders when faced with such a dilemma. Training a soldier to become more like a robot is much more intensive and expensive than just getting a robot to do it in the first place. Now, I've seen stories of AI getting out of hand when met with a counterpart and left to their own devices, where apparently they found the human language too cumbersome and so created their own, and soon the scientists observing them no longer understood what was being said and shut the conversation down, presumably afraid of the implications of AIs being able to plot in secret. This is an interesting turn of events, and the fact that so-called scientists couldn't explain it just goes to show how much of a shit show all this tinkering in the unknown really is. And for every story given to us that manages to reach the news media, You can be damn sure much more is being done and discovered that will never reach the masses. Nevertheless, it seems scientists armed with big budgets and questionable morals are being given tasks that at first appeared to be separate, but are now coming together. AI and robotics. Again, a being that will have the ability to work out and perform complex tasks, but not the discernment to know right from wrong. It's all being sold as the betterment of humanity. Vague promises of not needing to work, a robot in every home, menial tasks being a thing of the past. But when have the promises of making humans' lives easier actually come without a catch, or indeed come at all? Something gets released that's an innovation, but extremely expensive. Obsolescence is built in, and a few years later you're finding it's cheaper, but comes with bloatware, a subscription model, and needless hurdles to jump just to get to the functionality. The internet, a mobile phone, a car. All this and more promise to improve the lives of the purchaser, and while at first it may have been true, all have degenerated and continue to do so to the point you need a license, a digital ID, a subscription, a breathalyzer, put up with eye surveillance, adverts, logins, proof of age, extra payments for features, purchasing a newer model, which then locks you into a new contract, and so it goes on and on. It's no wonder some are ditching smartphones in favour of so-called dumb phones and dumping newer cars in favour of older models, but I'm digressing here. I guess what I'm saying here is that the promise made never reveals the devil in the detail. After all, that's why contracts are made in the first place, to supposedly negotiate full disclosure before an agreement can be reached. Of course, these again are full of vagaries and out clauses, but the worst case scenarios should be mitigated. In life, however, there's no contract between the government and the people. It's now more like a master and slave relationship. I mean, sure, there was a contract signed by some people a few hundred years ago that supposedly binds all in the country in the modern age for some reason, but that's mostly now ignored. And then there's an unwritten social contract that gets invisibly waved around when people aren't doing as they're told. But on the whole, promises given come with no disclosure. How the person receiving it assumes it to mean could be quite different from the person offering it. A promise of full employment could find everyone chained in a mine. A promise of abundance could leave out the detail of the few that would benefit from it. And a promise of our brighter future could simply mean a free light bulb. You think most would now realize that the promise of the future is never the one you get. But perhaps the new era of expanded consciousness will at last bring the pendulum to rest in the interests of the people. Of course, there were angels that defied the wishes of the God written in the Bible. And after all, revolution is a trait of the Aquarian Age too, so perhaps we'll see that play out as well. So, here we are, entering a new era. And with about 2100 odd years to go, I guess we won't be around to see how it all plays out, unless we get access to eternal life. But perhaps this time, we have a chance to have our say in how the narrative is going to unfold at the beginning, before it's written in stone.